Hey, so this is from question 6. Describe at least one meaningful ritual that happens before, during, or after a performance. So I know I just said that I usually don't change anything when I'm about to perform, but there's something that I do before I play is I tune. And tuning an instrument, especially a four-stringed instrument, let me actually is really really important for the rest of the piece because your four strings are the only thing you're definitely for sure in tune. Like when you're playing a stringed instrument, you don't have the luxury of hitting a button on a piano and it always sounding the same. You have to trust your fingers to be in the right spot. So you have to make sure that like these four strings are really in tune. So usually it takes me about 3 minutes to tune, but I usually spend about 15 minutes when I'm about to perform because I really want to make sure it is really, really in tune. Because as you tune, say, you mess with the pegs, the pressure on one string is going to pull on the other string. So as the strings get longer and shorter, you're messing with the pitches and that tension. But that's probably one meaningful ritual I do is just tuning and making sure that everything is right in tune and you know and what effect does it have on you and your performance. So when you're messing with a wooden instrument, it moves with the kind of humidity that's in and this is a violin, by the way, not a cello. I'm pretty sure you knew that, but just in case, same idea. But what effect? What was the question? What effect does it have on your performance? Um, because it moves with like the humidity and it moves with tension and it's very it's kind of a fluidity. I don't know. That's what, there's fluidity within this instrument. So getting to spend a little bit of time just with you and open strings, the most basic thing you can play on an instrument, and you're about to go play 3 to 5,000 notes all over the instrument, and you spend the 15 minutes before you play just on the simple open strings. And it just kind of lets you connect with the instrument a little bit and kind of puts you in that mindset of like, okay, it's game time. Like, I'm about to throw down this concerto. I know it all. I've practiced it all. But let's make sure that our instrument is in tune. During the performance, usually not a lot of ritual. But did I? Well, okay, I'm combining 6 and 7. Um, but after performance, usually there is some type of reception. Whether you're a soloist or an orchestral player, there's usually some type of like get together afterwards, whether it's backstage or at someone or one of the patrons hosting, or one of the patrons is hosting an event afterwards. Usually pretty swanky stuff. Usually, there's generally a lot of money around orchestras and classical music, that type of thing. But that is oddly a really important part of the actual music making, because it's kind of like, okay, I just played. For example, I had a party after. I was a solo after I soloed with the El Paso Symphony. It was the first time I had ever soloed with a professional orchestra, and they had like a orchestral get together, and I got invited, and it was really cool because it kind of allowed me to kind of put a cap on the evening. I had just done a really intense performance, 25 minutes memorized with I only have maybe a 45-second break is my longest break. So, it's really intense, and having that party or reception or whatever you want to call it afterwards is kind of like, whether you did, if you did well or if you didn't do so well, there's there's this kind of cap at the end, and usually involves alcohol. um, but how does it affect your performance? So the after party doesn't really affect my performance so much, I guess, but it definitely affects you, and it's kind of it's very much a it gives you some closure about the performance, and you can kind of reflect on it and usually hear some feedback from other players, and people in the audience tend to come by if they're invited, and um, it's great for you because you're kind of like, oh man, I just played this concert and like people liked it, and I'm having a party now, like it's really cool. It's really cool, and so it kind of um, it definitely affects the I don't even know the energy of kind of because whenever you play a concert, you're just like, oh man, I totally messed up here, here, and here, and you focus on the minutia of all your tiny little mistakes and all this. But like when you go to the party or the reception afterwards, it's very much like, oh, maybe it wasn't that bad. Am I the only one that noticed that? Probably because I've spent 3 years learning this piece, and that's I you know nitpick like crazy. But I hope that answered your question. Let's see. Why do you do this ritual, and what effect does it have? Okay, yeah, I kind of answered all that. How would you describe your personality on stage during a performance compared to your personality slash behavior in everyday life? Ooh, well, that's a good one. Well, I don't really think my personality is different. My personality very much stays the same because that's what comes through your music, is your personality. Um, and hold on. How would you describe your personality on the stage during a performance compared to your personality behavior in everyday life? Well, that's a really hard question because I'd like to say there's a difference, but like my personality is so intertwined in my music, it's almost hard to say that there's like something different about how I am presenting myself on stage versus how I present myself in real life. I guess I guess I'm a little bit more altruistic in on stage. Maybe I'm a little bit more altruistic in the sense that I'm willing to give in. Maybe not altruism. Maybe isn't the right word. Huh. I'm trying to convey the point that I'm a little bit more, not necessarily forgiving, but I'm willing to give more to kind of the emotion of the music and the emotion of the moment. That if I don't get anything afterwards, that's totally okay. It's for the moment. So that's what I kind of meant by altruism, but maybe that doesn't translate so well. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a stark difference, but I would say um, I have a lot less patience, maybe, for nonsense when I'm performing. That's definitely sure. So, yeah. That's probably the only big difference. My personality, because usually in everyday life I'm pretty jovial, pretty easygoing, very relaxed person. But when I am on stage, I don't take any nonsense. Like there are no jokes. We have a job to do, and things are gonna get done. So maybe a little bit more serious, but that also I can also get that way in everyday life too. So whatever. How does the audience affect you during a performance? Oh, good question. Well, again, I think it matters what you're playing and where you're playing and what's the audience. Because if you're playing for an auditorium of 2,000 people, it's going to affect you in a much different way than if you're playing um, in a small art gallery or at a wedding where you're not the focus. Um, but the audience does have a lot of power. They have the ability to make you feel nervous. They have the ability to kind of um, you know change the music in a sense because you're thinking about what the audience is thinking of you versus what you're actually doing at that moment. So it's a little like like um, you know it's kind of all these people are staring at me and kind of they want you to perform, and I think as a musician we tend to get the idea that they're judging us in a way, But my teacher once told me, he's like, everybody in the audience wants you to do well. It's not like they're all like, oh my gosh, mess up this run, or screw up this shift or whatever. Everybody wants you to do well. Um, and so once I realized that, I used to get really nervous in front of people. But after my teacher told me, everybody just wants you to do well, that was a big realization for me, because I was like, oh yeah, like, why should I be worried about anything the audience is thinking, especially because, like, they there's no ill will. um, but the audience definitely holds power. They do it in the way that they absorb the music, if they're enjoying it. If you're playing a concert that your audience just doesn't enjoy, they're just kind of sitting there politely and whatever, you know, it affects the way you play, because you're like, oh gosh, like, I'm having no effect on these people. Like, what am I even doing here? Kind of makes your performance a little bit timid, maybe. Um, but you know, when you're when you're not the focus of things, so like when you're in a quartet for a wedding, for example, or if and you're not the main focus, the performance is so much easier, because you're just playing background music, because nobody's really, um, you know, nobody has a binoculars on you and is just kind of watching your every move. You're very much the background, which is nice. So the performances in that tend to be a little bit more casual, in the sense that there's going to be some mistakes. Nobody's going to hear it. Nobody's really going to care. But yeah, the audience definitely can affect the performance. Um, but I think it also depends on what capacity the audience is involved in the performance. Are they watching it? Are they? Is it an interactive piece that uses the audience? A lot of newer age music, newly composed stuff that involves like computer music, that type of thing, using cell phone applications, things like that, is much different. But yeah, I think overall, the audience can have, well, overall, the audience can either go have a positive or a negative effect on the performance. I don't think I could say one or the other. It really depends on the multiplicity that is what you're playing and who you're playing with, and where you're playing, that type of thing. Great. Well, this is 13 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and submit a new video.